Recording in progress.
Yes, the two order numbers, sorry. Yeah, Leo and Gavin.
Wie doen ze het? Doen ze het?
So that's No. I think there was some
Is the Rav ready to start?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, the Rav's ready. Okay, the Rav can start. It's all ready to go.
It was starting at Kapitel Tillim. Shilam Alois, Esain Alorim, Me'ayin Yoba Ezri, Ezri Mimadainoi, Oisei Shemaim Voretz, Al Yitem Lamoid Aglecha, Al Yonum Shemrecha, Hine Lo Yonum Velo Yishon, Shoymei Yisrael, Adonai Shemrecha, Adonai Tzilcha Yad Yeminecha, Yoimam Hashemesh Lo Yakeka, V'yireach V'lo Ila, Adonai Yishmach Mekal Ra, Yishmar Es Nafshecha, Adonai Yishmar Tzeischo V'yecha, Me'ata V'yad Olam. Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Anasunim B'tzor V'shivya, Oim V'imim V'ashamakim Merachim Aleim Yatzim Mitzor L'Rvacha, Apel Lo'ira Meshibet L'Gulash V'gol Zman Koriv V'noimar Amen. We gathered to give the Kavod Achron to such a loss for Klal Yisrael, a loss for, especially for our Kehillah, Agudahs Yisrael, a loss for our city, Toronto, a loss for the whole belt of those. We're so worried now about the hostages, Mrs. Zolty, and those who went through the Holocaust, They were hostage just for a few years. You can't imagine. My parents always spoke about when they were in the concentration camps. I mean, here we're hostages for 47 days. They were hostages for years. Made Yidden feel like they were nothing. And look where they came out. Look what they built afterwards. Look at the Zoltys. Reb Moshe Zolty together with his wife, Mrs. Hessa Zolty. Look what they built. Our shul especially has to be so thankful. They did so much for our Medrash, for our Kehillah, for the whole Kehillah, for the Kehillah of Toronto, the Kehillah of Klal Yisrael. They did so much. They were able to come from the ashes where everyone thought everything is burned, everything was lost. Families were lost, Kehillahs were lost, Hasidus was lost, Yeshivas were lost. And look what they built. Look what we have, our Medrash and the whole Kehillah all over the world. People who didn't give up, persevered. In a time when there was Nisyanis after the Milchama, many people, after Milchama, people lost the munah. And the people like Reb Moshe Zolty and Mrs. Zolty, the steadfast munah they came with. The steadfast, anytime you spoke to Mrs. Zolty and Reb Moshe, the strong emunah in the Rebbeinu Shleilim, in emunah in Klal Yisrael, in emunah that everything that happens, that's where they're able to build such a beautiful, illustrious family, the family of Reb Dovid, Reb Shlomie, and the Samuel family, and the Kamentsky family, our children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, everyone, people have been proud all over Europe for having such children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Every one of them is like a tree that's blossoming all over in the world. We just finished saying the Tilim Eseina Eloharim, Ma'an Yobe Ezri. Chazal teach us Eseina Eloharim. What are the Harim, the mountains? Is the Har Sinai and Har Moriah. Har Sinai, the Torah was given, and Har Moriah with this Mesiras Nefesh. This Mesiras Nefesh of Mrs. Zolty with her family, these people, Mamash Moise Nefesh, after Muhammad, they went to Vineland, went everywhere, and to make sure to keep what the Hiram, Chazal say also as Ein El Hiram, the parents, the Mesoris Avos, to remember the Hiram, to remember the parents. Anytime you spoke to Mrs. Zolty, her beautiful home that you came from, the Erliche home, the illustrious home that you came from, so Esein Eloharim, you lift your eyes to the two mountains, the mountain of Torah and the mountain of Mesiras Nefesh. This is what the Zoltys were. Mountain of Torah, the whole, to keep up Torah wherever it is, in every way, in Avodah, Torah, Avodah, Mels Chasodim, in every way of Torah mitzvahs. If there's anyone in our Kehillah, we're now learning the parashas of the Torah of the Avos. The Swarm bring down that these parashas are the real Torah. You see, Mais Avos, how the Avos acted, how they built their home. I mean, the home of Reb Moshe and Hessa was a home, Shechina was in the home. You felt when you went in the home, the Shechina was in that home. And Chazal say Shechina, if there's Shalom B'neiim, if you want to see an example of a husband and wife, the covenant they gave to each other, Every time we went into the house, the covenant that Moshe gave, the covenant Mrs. Zolty gave to each other, the covenant the caring, in every way, in every place. This is an example. If you want to see an example of our Avos, the homes of our Avos, Avrohom and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, and Yaakov, Rachel, Leah, you went to the Zolty home. You felt the kedusha in the home, the holiness. You felt the cheretz in the home, the cheretz for every person they spoke to, every person. And we know that in Achos Hayomim it says, and we're up to the Achos Hayomim. We don't know what's happening now. It's what Muhammad this is, but everyone thought during the Second World War that was going already, and what everyone went through, and what Klal Yisrael went through, the pogrom they went through now, and what's going on now, continue to go happening. And it says when the time for Gula will come, Avrohom and Yitzchak and Yankov will come and try to be the senator for Klal Yisrael, the advocate for Klal Yisrael. And Avroham's advocacy didn't help. Yitzchak didn't help. Rachel Imenu comes and cries to the Rabbi Shlomie, look what I did. Look what I did. Look what I did to build Klal Yisrael. I gave everything up. So there should be a Klal Yisrael. Her sister got 6 children. And she was zoiche, whatever she had, and she gave everything away. Chazal bring us that the tznius of Rachel Imenu, the tznius of Rachel Imenu was zoiche from her came out. B'yamim her came out Esther Amalka. Esther leMegedes Melatos. What's shat tznius? Tznius means every word you speak is oisgerechend. When you spoke to Mrs. Zolty, the chachma in her words, the pikchus in her word, and the tznius in her words, every word that came out of her was pure, kedusha with tahara, and the chachma that came out, the pikchus, the poems that she wrote, the beautiful, beautiful poems that she wrote about everything. And when you spoke to her, chachmas noshim bon sebeisa, it says the chachma of woman build the house. Chachma means to know when to speak and when not to speak. Tznius means Esolei Megedes Melata. Rachel knew when not to speak, what to say, when not to say, and that's Esther. That's the Gula comes from that. So when it says of the schus Rachel Imenu, the schus Noshim Tzedkonis Negala V'Seinim Mitzrayim, the schus Noshim, the woman of Klal Yisrael, will go out of this Golas. It's unbelievable. Women like Mrs. Zolty, what they did. If it's for Chnosas Kala, if it was for Beis Yankov, it was for Mikveh, anything that had to be done for Klal Yisrael, but was done with such bescheidenkeit, such Yiddishe tznius, her walking, her talking, Baruch Hashem, she's zoicha to have daughters who are emulating her in every way. The tznius, the chachmas of tznius. Tznius means the chachma of tznius, knowing what to say and when to say it and how to say it and how to speak. Well, Yiddishe mameret. I enjoyed every time speaking to her. She always, and I'm just thinking about her, the sparkle in her eye, every time you spoke to her, the sparkle in the eye, and every time making me feel, oh, the Rav came in, wow, it's the biggest, like I was the biggest person who came into the house, and make every person, but that's a tznius, that's the chachmas nashim ban sebeisa, the chachma of woman build a house. Baruch Hashem, look at the home that she built together with Reb Moshe. Look at the home of Reb Shlomie, of Dovid, and the whole family, and Diri and Dovid and the whole family, what they built. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable what they did for Klal Yisrael, and they're still doing. What they're still doing, the Paris from them, what they did, what they planted, are continuing. Today is a big loss for Klal Yisrael. A loss. We lost a queen. We lost somebody who we were able to look up to what the Doros Rishonim looked like. We lost, whenever, I lost my mother very young. And then every time I came to her home, you saw what a Yiddishe mom is. You saw what a Yiddishe mom is to clap the Yiddishe hearts, what she cares about, what moved her, what she wanted. This is what they built. It's a big loss for our Medrash, a big loss for Tequila, big loss for Toronto, big loss for Klal Yisrael, losing. And here you see something meridic. We spoke about the beautiful Shalom Bais. Tomorrow is Reb Moshe's yard site. People who live the beautiful life together, Rabbi makes that they leave this world together. They leave this world together. I heard that there's great-great-grandparents who also died in the same day. But the Rabbi made to show us, and to me it was always an example. It was always an example. Was a gebot of Torah, Midas, Chesed. Was a gebot of Emeskeit, Ehrlichkeit, pure Ehrlichkeit. And this is how she was able to bounce a Beisa. It was such an enjoyment to speak to her, because every word of her were diamonds. Every word that came out of her, the chachmas, with the little smile, with the little pikchas, with the little always. And that's how she built her home. And that's how Baruch Hashem, she built a home of children. Who, the kibbut avaim of the home comes from, you see, if there's kibbut avaim, you know what parents put into the children. You see kibbut avaim, you know that the Isis of Rekiv, it says that we're in Golas because of the kibbut av of Esav Russia, of the Rishonim, the kibbut av that they gave, and the schus of our kibbut avaim, the schus of Reb Moshe and Hessa always speaking about their parents. The covet, they always spoke with such covet about their home. And that's what they transplanted their home into their home here in Toronto. They transplanted the Yiddishe Masorah, Yiddishe Kedusha, the Yiddishe Tahara, Yiddishe Amunah, the Amunah Pshuta, the Ehrlichkeit, the Havas HaTorah. I mean, she loved Avertel. She loved Torah. He said over a word by her, she jumped up from Chias. And the same thing, a Yiddishe Nigan, a Shabbos Nigan, a Yiddishe Nigan, everything. And this is how they build their home. Chachmas Noshim Ban Sabesa. The Sat Reb Zolty once said, if you want to see who a person is, look at her children. You want to see the biggest edus for a mother. What's the biggest edus for a mama? Look at her family. You don't need any bigger edus. The edus of the children, of the beautiful homes that the children have, and the ehrlichkeit in the home, the Torah in the home, the chesed in the home, the midas in the home. You don't need any bigger. You don't need any other matzev. You don't need any monument. That's the biggest monument for her. Her children, but she put into the children this edelkeit, the ehrlichkeit. Every time you speak to any, and the feinkeit of the Havas HaTorah. So when we're learning now the Mais Avos, the learning what the Avos were, they're an example of what the Avos were. They're an example of what it means, what a mother does for her home, what the Yiddishe mamas, she was part of the Beis movement here. I mean, it's unbelievable, the Yiddishe techter, what we have, our daughters, the tznius of our daughters, and the tznius means the hanhaga of ehrlichkeit, hanhaga of a Yiddishe meidl, of a Bas Yisrael. She was an example. She went to speak sometimes in the Beis and other places, and she was an example of what it means, coming out of losing everything and coming out, still having the spirit of Bnei Malachim, the spirit of a Bas Melech, the spirit of a queen, the spirit of a Jewish queen, an Erlicha queen. The Rebbetzin should help. It's hard. Now that she passed away, the home is missing. The home of Moshe and Hessa are missing. It's such a home that we always try to emulate them and be like them and shep from them. Rebbetzin should help that she should be just like her whole life. She always had such love for every one of her children and grandchildren, great-children. Such love she had for everyone in Medrash. Such love she had for everyone in Klal Yisrael. Such love she had for every girl in Beis Yaakov. Such love she had for any Erlich Yid. And such love they had for Eretz Yisrael. Rebbetzin should help now that we're going through this time. We don't know what Rebbetzin is going to, we know it's going to end, B'toiv. And we know we're just now right before Chanukah. And we saw Chanukah, the Yontiv of Chanukah is the Yontiv of Tzadikim. Rishon b'yat tzadikim, zeidim b'yat goyzer esecha, tmeim b'yat tahirim. Chanukah showed us that after you go through everything, look who wins. Look at the beautiful doros that Mrs. Zolty built. Look at the beautiful palaces that she built. Palaces of Torah, palaces of Kedusha of Tahara. She's just like she always was such a Melitza's Yosher, always see the good in every person. Every time you spoke to her, she saw the good in every person. In every person, she only saw the good in every person. The Ayin Toiva, to see the Toiva of every person. And that's what we need, that Midah. But the Mizaki is the Midah of Ayin Toiva, Agita Oig, always sees only good in everyone. Always, and that's what she always saw the good in every person, in anything that was done, together with her husband, Reb Moshe. Now that she's coming to meet her husband, the day of his yard side is the day where they have Aliyah together, and then she She could shep nachas together with Moshe from what she built. Shep nachas from the family that she built. Shep nachas from the Gehillah she built. Shep nachas from everything that was done in the city through them. All the Moses HaTorah, Moses HaChesed. And B'laim Shehal, there should be Milis Yosher for Klal Yisrael. And Misha Amar Tzassein Da Yomer, Misha Amar L'Olam Amay Da Yomer Tzassein Da. We shouldn't see any more Tzoros. Never so many soldiers and so many people died. And so many, what's happening, Rabbi Shahab, that this should be the end. And just like it's unbelievable, like Yisrael now is ready to give up everything for Pidyon Shvuyim, just to take out the hostages, because Pidyon Shvuyim is the biggest mitzvah. And it says that when we do Pidyon Shvuyim in this world, Rabbi Shem is going to be paid to us. Rabbi Shem is going to be paid to Klal Yisrael. Who yiv das Am Yisrael, Berachmem, Rabbi Shem Shahab, should be Zoicha to see Tchias HaMesim, Beis HaGoyel, B'mher B'meinu, Amen.
We speaking, the Maspid, this particular Levaya, because there's so many different irrigation, so many different machshavos, so many different feelings that have to be put in a hesped like this for myself and me representing my Rebbetzin and the family. We go back a long, long time. Long, long time. Of course we do. When my wife lost her father, 3 years old, Dovid Zolty, killed in an accident. Shabbos going to shul, and there, from then on, was always Reb Moshe and his wife and his Rebbetzin, Hessa, always helping out, being there for them, always there, always part. And of course, we named our shul Bais, Dov, Yosef, Doi for Do Berish, and that's Zolty. And it was always there. You know, the tzure not only of Reb Moshe, but the Rebbetzin also. Yes, he's always there. My wife told me once an incredible story. She told me that the Hessa would come over. And when they were little, they were so with nothing. She would bring over ice cream. But it wasn't the ice cream. Just the ice cream. It was the cherry on top of the ice cream. That describes what Tante Hessa was. She was so incredibly good mit dem ganzen Herz, mit kol halev, always there for you, always there helping with feelings, with machshavos, with Liebschaft, with the habo rabo, being there and caring. That's what Reb Moshe and his Rebbetzin was. That's what I just said speaks volumes. I can be here speaking about Moses and everything, for hours, but I promise I'm going to make it short. And as a chesed to all of you, I have to. And but there's one thing that we have to learn and we have to keep in our name and in our schus, to do chesed with a cherry on top. Tehei nishmos tzuro b'tzorach.
Our mother was an extraordinary woman. All children think their mothers are extraordinary, and they probably are. But let me share with you how our mother was extraordinary. In all the years I've lived in our parents' home, I never once heard her say anything negative about anybody. This was well before all the anti-Lashon Hara movements. There wasn't yet a full consciousness about the evils of Lashon Hara, and yet we never heard it at home. I could really sit down now, and that's all you need to hear, because that tells a story in itself. But there's much more. There's much, much more to her than that. In another time, she would have been called a Renaissance woman, as her persona was multi-dimensional, multi-talented, and multifaceted in many different ways. Firstly, she had a photographic memory. When she worked for Chnosses Kala many years ago, she was the treasurer and in charge of the mailings. All of the hundreds of names on the list, she knew every person's address and postal code by heart. When I was about 10, in the summertime, she would make me learn Mishnayos Baal Peh. After each Mishnah, she would faher me. And I forgot it right away. But right after I said it, I forgot the Mishnayos. But she could just, from listening to me, when she fahered me, rattle off those Mishnayos 50 years later. My son-in-law Yaakov was discussing my mother's memory, her memory, not her memory, but her photographic memory one day. And Yaakov happened to mention that a photographic memory isn't always such a good thing. My father, with a broad, knowing smile, answered, "Yes, I have found that out." And he meant the hard way. Our mother was a wordsmith. She loved her crossword puzzles, anagrams, cryptograms. She loved the challenge of solving them. And solve them she did, in spite of English not being her first language. She was also a writer, mostly poetry. She would never talk about her war experiences. She would, however, write about them in her poetry, and what poetry it was. She was able to be much more profound with a few poetic lines, beautifully written, than with a long story. Among her body of work, she wrote in 3 languages, Polish, English, and Hebrew. So among her body of work are a few that stands out for me. One was with a near encounter with a Nazi officer in her hometown before she was deported. Another experience of being in a cattle car, a crowded cattle car, going to where she knew not where. These both are just mere poems, but real masterpieces, which would move anyone with a half of heart. She and Mrs. Chava Bleeman were often asked to speak at Bais Yaakov's about their war experiences. Tante Chava would speak about the war itself, while our mother would speak about the difficulty experienced immediately after the war, in the few months after the war. The aftermath, she would call it. And that was the title of her speech. Her account was so vivid and moving that when I read it, it made me cry. She recounts how she became frum again after so many years of not eating kosher, not having Shabbos or Yontif, not hearing a Yiddishe word. It's an amazing story that she shared with hundreds of Beis Yaakov girls over the years, and I'm sure it made an impression on them. It certainly made an impression on me. It points to a moment in time where everything changed, not only for her, but for those who would be her children, grandchildren, and her progeny to the end of time. When she reached her 80s, she felt her mind slowly slipping away, and she wrote about it in small poetic ditties. These were observations about herself aging. She wondered what was happening to her. She expressed her anxiety in poetry. These small poems were sad, funny, poignant, and even profound. My brother Shlomie's Batsheva collected them and compiled them into a book with illustrations. This book is worthy of publication. It's that good. These are just some of the things our mother was. She was, of course, much more. People would often tell me that she had this regal aura about her. She indeed naturally conducted herself as an aristocrat. She was also generous and compassionate to a fault, a balabasta, a balmidas par excellence. On behalf of my siblings and their spouses and myself and my spouse, I would like to take this opportunity to thank all those who took time out in their busy schedules to visit her. These visits gave her chiyus in her later years, and the family is very appreciative. I would also like to thank the caregivers, Marina, Elizabeth, Grace, and we had all of those that were temporary that came in when they were needed. And perhaps most importantly, Shelley Botnick, the Tzadekes, Chaim Weinberger, the Tzaddik, I envy their Olam Haba, and Hatzalah, and Joanna Lang, who is, Joanne is she's emergency room nurse, and she would come on her way to and way back from the hospital whenever we needed her. Even when she wasn't on her way, she would come, and she would do procedures that the caregivers couldn't do, and when we needed her, she was just there. So we are fully thankful to all of those people. They gave years to our mother's life. May she be a melitz yoser for all of us.
Yesterday, I was in the hospital. My mother hasn't been well for a while. For some reason or another, she was on antibiotics. She's a little bit more alert than her regular self at that stage of life. And my last conversation with her, I said, Ma, you wouldn't believe, you know Parsha this week? It's Parshas Vayetze. This is Parshas Vayetze. That's your favorite Rashi in Chumash. This is my mother used to quote this Rashi. She'd speak. You'd think it's one of her pieces of poetry. The way she would say it over. Elamagit shiyitzias tzadik minei ir minamakam oisa roishim. Shebizmancha tzadik beir hu haida hu ziva hu hadara. Yatsa misham pana aida pana ziva pana hadara. When a tzaddik makes a roshim in the city, and when he leaves, it's the magnificence of the city, the splendor of the city, the majesty of the city is gone. And whenever the Rav, soll sein gesund, would quote this by Kiddush or whatever, by Drasha, my mother would like sing it on the way home. There's two things I think that resonated with my mother about this Rashi. Number one, she understood that there's a chiyuv to make a person's put on this world to make a roshim. It's not. This is what a tzaddik's supposed to do. It's not to stay in his own corner. He's in the city. He makes a roshim. But number two, my mother understood that there's this idea of hoid, ziva, hadara. That was very important. My mother led a life of majesty. You know, people tell me, whenever somebody says, "Oh, your mother, she was a queen. She was a queen." Everybody, a princess, queen. That was my mother. My mother, whatever she did, my mother would never. You would never find my mother not perfectly dressed. She would always be, wearing a sheitel. All her waking days, never not. She was ready to, as if a guest was about to come. That's what my mother looked like. She, the way she greeted everybody felt wonderful and so special after a hello from my mother. It was just the aura that my mother created. It says, this majesty, this is what my mother had. Like Rashi says, that it's the Yom Achrim is the Yom HaMisa, to have the Yom HaMisa, to have a Shem Tov at Yom HaMisa. Everything was, her whole life was to that her parents should be proud of her, that family should be proud of her, that she should be proud of herself. And the pasuk goes on to say, "Pia pascha b'chachma, Torah's chesed al l'shoina." And as my brother spoke, how intelligent and smart my mother was, but everything she said, everything she did was fully with chachma. And as my brother mentioned, she went through the war, my mother, and it was very traumatic. But just as traumatic was the aftermath of the war, where at one point my mother did not know of any religion. She didn't even realize that there's such a thing like Torah. I mean, they came out of the camp, she's like totally blank. And the first time that she saw somebody wearing, she happened to pass by a room and she saw a young boy putting on a pair of tefillin. She just couldn't believe that this was happening. Not that my mother saw this at home so often, because I'm sure my Zeda al-Shalom davened in shul most of the time. But it shocked my mother, and until she made a decision one day that, no, my life is not going to be, I have to go in the way of my parents. And while many of her friends went the Zionistic path, or a lot of them became atheists, my mother made a decision to join the Bais Yaakov, and this is where she felt that she was at home at. Just want to mention my mother's name. Just I know there's a lot of my mother's a lot of Eniklach here. There was this name Hessa my mother has a history. My mother is an Enikel from Rebbe Reb Heschel. Rebbe Reb Heschel did his Zivik Sheni. A child was born after he was nifter. And they decided they have to call, it was a girl, couldn't call him Heschel. So they named the child Hessia. And this Hessia married Rav Meir from Apta, and his great-grandchild was the Apta Rav from Shua Heschel. And finally, the Reb Shlomo Bochner married a Hessa, an Anikel, and it's a badge that is worn in our family. it's a show of our illustrious ancestor that we're all proud of. And Hessa really means a lot in our family. Baruch Hashem, we didn't have to name somebody Hessa for nearly 100 years. Baruch Hashem. But my brother already did the thank yous. Yeah. Just want to mention that, talk about my mother being royal. This Zivik Sheni that Reb Heschel made was to Reb Shaul Val, who was a famous king for the day story. I don't know if you remember when you were a child. So my mother actually was royalty. She just wasn't a queen from nothing. She was actually a queen. But my brother was thanking about. I think we could, if we say Moedim twice in Shemona Esrei, Chazar I can do a Chazar Shatz, and especially for thanking Chaim Weinberger, who is Chaim. That's what his name's all about, and Mrs. Botnick, whose name shouldn't be Shali. All my siblings, it's been many years. First my father, and also my mother. But the one who took the largest, I wouldn't say the word burden wouldn't be correct, but whose life was impacted. Both my sister and Dudi, their lives were impacted by the health of my parents all these years. That there was a lot of decisions to make, a lot of work to be done. To take care of the household, and my sister slept with a phone, I think, every night for the last 5 years. Spent a lot of time. Didi would take my sister to the hospital, to here, there. They couldn't really go anywhere because my sister felt that she has to be close to home. And we'll always be very grateful, thankful to both of you. Just, the Klei Yakar says that you can ask a question. Yaakov wasn't the first one, V'yetze Yaakov. Avrohom also left a city, and Yitzchak did also. Why does it say V'yetze Yaakov? Why it's passed by him? So the Klei Yakar says because it didn't impact anybody when Avrohom left and Yitzchak left, because they didn't leave any tzaddikim left in the city. There's nobody there to appreciate it. But when my mother, she's leaving us, and it's going to be very difficult for the family, for the kihlah. And I thank Rabbi Shalom for all the years we had with my mother.
Gathered together to give the cover achrein to Ma, Papi, Mrs. Zolty. No Shlomie said Chazor Sashatz, Midav Hashachar said Bemencho also. When just we made, the Rav said is the ganze drasha that the Rav gave, I can make personally as a Adam, where he treated me like a son, or like the Rav said, treated me like every person that he treated everywhere. We know that the drashas around, all the Mefarshim ask, all these parshas, like the Rav said, the Avos, Nimois, Altsnege, Tzema. Drashas around fragt, schickt a Bais Besuel, what kind of shidduch is that? Dafka nem von die Mishpacha. Third is Midas. That's the first thing. Midas is something that's given over from generation to generation. It says in the blood. It was in Ma's blood, and she gave it over to her children also, to all of her children. A deis can beiten. Those can have the wrong deis, that could be changed. Aber Midas in the blood line. Like Shlomie mentioned, Dudi and Haichu, how they were there, I think Baruch 37 years living next to them, I'm not sure exactly. But Baruch 37 years, Ma and Pa used to go there for the storm. And treated them like parents, like they were, side to Dudi, side to Haichu. And a special mention to Haichu, like Shlomie said, how she took care of everything, not just from the health, from running everything from beginning to end, with the Zayashrus, as a mom used to say, with a arena cup. That's what she had, and that's what she gave to everybody, and treated everyone equally. Amen.
Bobby, you were a queen, and you were our queen. After the Holocaust, Bobby met somebody from her town, Kislev, and this person told her, "Von dein Yichus darf dir nicht schämen." From your Yichus, from your lineage, you don't have to be embarrassed, you don't have to be ashamed. Say, as du sollst nicht verschämen dein Yichus. See to it that you don't embarrass and you don't shame your Yichus, your lineage from where you came from. And Bobby lived with this message. Bobby was a descendant, like was mentioned, from Reb Shlomo Bochner, from the Rav and Kshanev, Shlomo ben Fega, and from the Rebbe Reb Heschel, and from Bianca Schoenberg and the whole Schoenberg family. So we learn about Gadlus Ha'odam, and it's something that people learn from Svarim and in Yeshiva. And this Bobby had Gadlus Ha'odam in her DNA. And she got it from her home, from what she saw. Bobby used to always say, when people greeted her father in the street, they used to say, Mit Kuved Reb Dovid. It's the regal, and people understood and recognized that he himself did things with Gadlus Ha'odam, and they recognized it, and they gave him that title, and they gave him that greeting. Really, everything about Bobby is beyond words to say, but if I could say a few things, I remember we were in her kitchen and I said something, and it's Rabbi Lowy mentioned before, and my uncle's mentioned before, the chokhmah, the way it's not what you say, it's how you say it, and that's what she taught me, and I think she taught us all to use a different word. She said, instead of using this word, use the word silly instead. It's more bakavadik. I understand what you want to say, but use the word silly. And the way Bobby greeted everybody, it's a Gadlus Ha'odam. If someone has covered for themselves, they understand how to respect and give dignity to other people, and greeting other people, and everything with a positive outlook. And she really, besides just being that, but she also taught it. When we were in her house, she used to make mention always, to look at things in a positive way. And even when it came to eating, for everything in life, it's not just some things, every single part of your life, she understood that has to be done with dignity and with kavod. And even with eating, the way she ate, the way Zaidi ate as well. And they used to teach us and show us this is the proper way, even when it came to eating. And, we're standing in the shul in Agudah. This is Bobby's, really, it's Bobby's second home. She was so attached to the Agudah and the people here. And everyone was so nice to her, and she was so nice and caring about everybody. Zaydi used to listen to the Gemara tapes, the Daf Yomi tapes. And it was very important to him. I remember I took a ride back with them in the car from the Catskills, and Bobby listened together with Zaydi to the tapes, I could say maybe the whole way. It's amazing that she understood the chashivas HaTorah and how much it meant to Zaydi. And I remember not only she allowed him to listen, but she was involved. And when the tape finished, she turned around and she said, she was showing me with her fingers that Goydel, Etzba, Amma, Kmitza, and Zeres. See, I was listening. Bobby, we spoke about it before. After she went to afternoon classes, even though they went to Goyish school in Poland, but in the afternoon, she used to say that she used to run and have a spring in her step when she ran to go to the afternoon classes, the Hebrew classes, the Yiddishe classes, where they learned the Torah. And after the war, I believe, after the war, she also learned a lot, and I think it was the Bais Yaakov or whatever they had for the women and for the girls. The things that she learned from before or afterwards, she memorized them by heart, and she used to say it with passion and geschmack, always to anybody that was around her. You saw that she lived this, the Nevi'im and the Malchi Yisrael, to say all of them by heart, and even Mishnayos and some Gemaras, and like Shlomie mentioned, to repeat it. But she repeated these things with a passion. And she also was spoken about, was she writing poems, to write a poem even to the capo, to understand, in a way of expressing yourself and using the talent to help people. Throughout her life, she wrote things sometimes directly to people, indirectly, sometimes for herself, to use her talent to express and to be mechazik people. I want to, Bobby also used to say something that was always on her tongue when we were around her. She used to say, everybody needs to have a tante Rivcha. So what does that mean? What did Bobby mean? Bobby had an aunt, her name was Rivcha, a aunt also, her aunt, the tante. And she used to, I believe she only had one child that was about Bobby's age. And she used to take her out and give her the time and give her the attention. And Bobby felt that there's sometimes families, whether it's not in the nature of the parents or whether the parents are too busy or too occupied and not able to, we should always look out for other people that need it, and we could become their tante Rivcha. We could do that for them, and that's really what Avrohom was saying before, the cherry on top. That's something that she taught us, to give and to attention to the children that need it and be their tante Rivcha. I want to say, if anybody was around Bobby and knew her well, you definitely heard this Mishnah in Ovis and Perkin Torah. And I think it's appropriate that I'm going to say parts of the Mishnah. And Bobby used to say this with great passion, and I believe that she lived her life with this as well. Omer Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma, Pamachas Yisi Mahalach Baderech. Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma was walking on the way, and someone stopped him, V'nosan li sholem, v'chzarti lo sholem. And he said Shalom Aleichem, and I said Shalom Aleichem back. He asked me where I'm from, and he said, I'm from a Ir Gedoyla of Chachamim and Soifrim. He responded, I'm willing to come live with us. I'm willing to give you all the money in the world. And Rabbi Yossi ben Kisma responded, you can give me all the wealth in the world. And the Mishnah continues, elo toiro masim tovim bilvad. When a person leaves this world, the only thing that goes along with him is a toiro masim tovim. And Bobby, for sure, you're taking that along. You have a great family, and you for sure do not have to worry about embarrassing the generations above you. You give them great kavod, and it's an honor for the generations above you. And we now have to see to it that we don't embarrass you. My parents, Tati and Mami, lived near Bobby and Zaidi for many years. And we really very much benefited from that. Besides on the Tante Rivcha level, or meaning what I was saying before, but as well, just seeing Bobby and Zaidi and what they lived for and what they stood for. And Mami and Tati, you gave so much, you were so devoted. And Mami never left Bobby, or even Zaidi, Bobby and Zaidi. You never left their side, and you're always there for them. You're afraid to leave, you're afraid to go away. And I asked my mother how she was able to give so much. Mommy responded, I had a great mother, and the best mother that I could have. And we know that Bobby never asked for anything. She never wanted to be a burden on anybody. And Mommy said, there's only so much I could do to give back how much Bobby and Zaidi gave to us. I know it was mentioned before, but I want to say on a personal level, and also for my siblings and the rest of the family as well, a great thank you to Elizabeth and to Marina and anybody else that helped, and also a special thank you to Chaim and Shelley and Joanne.
If you hear me repeat some of the same messages as you heard those speak before me, it means one thing. It means that whether you're looking from the perspective of a Rav, of a child, of a grandchild, we all saw the same thing in my grandmother. Bobby, my grandmother, Hessa Zolty, to us as grandchildren, was a queen. She had regalness, a majesty, a dignity, an elegance, a nobility, a true Bas Melech. Yet, she was warm and witty and had a great memory and always used to tell us about what she learned in Beis Yaakov as a child. She loved, as my cousin Zevi mentioned, telling over the list of Shoftim, of all the Nevi'im, of the Malachim, and somehow it had stored in her memory from years ago. In her later years, when her mind started weakening, she couldn't even remember who her family was. She still remembered all the Nevi'im, all the Malachim, all the Shoftim. Our best memories of our youth are going over to Bubby's house with all the cousins on Friday afternoon, where we could be sure there'd be kakash cake, there'd be treats on the table, there would be a smile, a warm word. Her dignified elegance and generosity didn't just appear. She had two aunts before the war, her aunt Tante Rivcha and Rachel Glass, who had this dignity that she saw. They had a generosity. They always bought her gifts, sometimes small, but meaningful. She made a conscious decision to be like them, to be a mative to people in a meaningful way, to be a gracious and graceful person. She was deeply involved in Achnasas Kala. She spent many years as its treasurer. She helped run it with sensitivity, with dignity, and with leadership. She hosted many teas for tzedakah organizations and for mostos in our city. She hosted many tzaddikim, Gedolei Hadar, and Rebbes at her home. I would guess that in that zchus, she and her husband merited to be mishadech with Gedolei Hadar. She hosted Shlichei Mitzvah and families of those who came to Toronto, sometimes from overseas, for medical care, taking care of many of their needs. She prepared food for many in need. She hosted the Agudas Simchas Beis HaShoeva for many years. She was the Akeres Habayis for her husband, my grandfather, Reb Moshe Zolty. She always stood by his side. She stood steadfastly behind my grandfather and all of his community initiatives, and most of us that he helped build in Toronto, including this shul, the Agudah, Camp Agudah, Beis Yaakov High School, Beis Yaakov Elementary School, now Yisrael, many other mostas. She helped build a vibrant community of Torah from the ashes of the war. She had a very strong knit circle of friends here, survivors like she, mostly from the area in Poland where she grew up. They had all lost their families, so they became each other's family. They would meet together weekly in what they called the Sunshine Club. Her home was a home built on Torah and mitzvahs. Her house itself was built with many Torah and mitzvahs in mind. A mikveh, a sukkah in the closet bedroom, a washing station in the dining room long before it was fashionable. She raised doros, yisharim of children and grandchildren, oskim b'torah mitzvahs, and oskim b'torah chitzibur be'emunah. She loved her life and her family before the war, and always talked about growing up in Kchanov, Poland, with such warmth and excitement. She rarely spoke about the war. It was too painful. Every time she mentioned her younger sister, Leah, who was only 10 when she was taken by the Nazis, it was with sadness and with pain. The only way she was able to express the pain of that time of her life was through poetry. She had a real brilliance for poetry and wrote about all the good times and the bad. As was mentioned, she wrote a poem in the camp after getting in trouble with her Jewish capo for taking an extra potato. The capo was so impressed with it that she let her off the punishment because of the poem. Her talent was so unique that she somehow managed to translate the poems she originally wrote in Polish into English and make them still rhyme. The poems about the dark times expressed in such a deep way the sorrow, the pain, and even more so the dread she felt during the war in the camps and after finding out the fate of her loved ones. The poems about the good times were full of wit and humor, about the realities of life, for better or worse. She even wrote a poem in Hebrew after the war as a plea to her father, who was killed al Kiddush Hashem, to give her from Shamayim guidance to find her Bashert. Seems to have worked. After the war, whenever she encountered a challenge, she asked herself, what would my father advise me to do? One vivid memory of the war that she did speak about was the Shabbos that her father came home from an underground minyan in May in 1942 and told her to go to the photographer in town on Shabbos to have her picture taken. The picture was to enable her to get a job at a rubber factory that her father thought could save her from deportation and save her life. But the confusion of being forced to be Mechal Shabbos and the pain of seeing her from Erlich, a father who she admired so much, having to make such a decision and force his daughter to be Mechal Shabbos was more than my grandmother could bear. We have all seen that picture, which we have to this day, and can see the pain and confusion in her eyes. She remembered her father's last words to her brother when he was taken by the Nazis. Under what circumstances he could eat food that wasn't kosher, to daven whenever possible, and most of all, to not forget who you are. In the bits and pieces that my grandmother spoke about the war, she talked about sitting in the dark corner of the concentration camp barracks with her friends, talking about bitachon, singing Shabbos Miras their fathers used to sing at home. Quoting her very own words, which today, under the tragic current circumstances, we now ask as a tefillah to Hashem. The brunt of war will never fade in a survivor's mind. It reaches deep into their souls and leaves a bitter imprint, a constant reminder how vulnerable a human can be in the face of hate. May the future generations, Be'ezus Hashem, never have to experience any senseless wars and savagery and the brutality that accompany them. As my father mentioned, my grandmother used to go around, my grandmother used to go around to Beis Yaakov classes with Mrs. Bleeman and share her story of after the war, how Beis Yaakov saved her. I want to give you a few more of those details. After the war, as you've heard, many of her friends, out of desperation, aligned themselves with non-religious organizations. She described herself as coming out of the war physically alive, but feeling that inside she was dead. In the Bergen-Belsen DP camp, a few months after the war, a friend encouraged my grandmother to attend the Beis Yaakov group. My grandmother, at 20, felt too old for school, so she said no. But this was her first awakening to the fact that there still remained a spark of Yiddishkeit after the war. The second awakening, as my uncle Shlomie mentioned, was when she saw two Yidden who later moved to Toronto, davening with tefillin in the camp. The next time she and her sister were invited to attend the Beis Yaakov group, her sister decided to go, and my grandmother said she would escort her to the door. When she got to the door, she heard familiar words from the past. She hadn't heard Hebrew spoken in around 4 years. It was Psukim of Tehillim. As if in a trance, she slowly started to say them word for word with the teacher. The teacher saw her at the door, walked over, slowly pulled her in, and sat her down. The teacher continued the shir as if nothing important had just happened. But my bubby, pondering the irony of it all, sitting in a Beis Yaakov class in the very death camp where so many Yidden had perished, felt like she awoke from a deep slumber. She felt this is where she belongs. This is her past, and this will be her future. This is her Beis Yaakov. This is her real life. Bubby, your parents, Rav Dovid and Liv Sheglath, had no Levaya and no Hespedim. But your life was their Hesped and attested to the home you grew up in. May the lives of your children, your grandchildren, and great-grandchildren be an attestment to your life and to the home and the greatness that we grew up watching and witnessing. Bubby, you were one of the last of the survivors of the Churban of Europe, and you had the zchus of rebuilding Klal Yisrael after the war. May you be a Malitza Yosher for your family, for this shul, for this community, and for all of Klal Yisrael.
at the Chalk of Agudas Yisrael, Shacharis at 7 o'clock at 141 Dunblane, Mincha Marif at 4:40 this week and 4:35 next week. I'd like to ask everybody to please let David go out first. Thank you very much.
First, I ask please to walk.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Akiva Balter, and on behalf of the family and the Chevra Kadisha of Agudas Yisrael and congregation of Agudas Yisrael, I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to give Kavod Achron to Mrs. Hessa Zolty Alea Shalom. We will endeavor to bring you the photos of the procession, the actual Levaya from the Bais Medrash as it leaves down McGilvery Avenue. In addition to that, about a half hour after that, we will try to show the Kvura from the Feld as well. You can take this time to write a note to the family if you would like, but I would ask all those who are identified on Zoom by their phone or by some nickname to change the name to your actual name so the family will know that you logged in. Thank you again on behalf of the family who should again meet of Simchas.